Hi folks, I'm Matt and welcome to My Expanded Universe, a show where I go through the entire EU in chronological order as best I know how. Folks, we're going to go into the comic books now, into a 3-issue series called X-Wing Rogue Leader. This is written by Hayden Blackman and it stars the original cast of X-Wing Rogue Squadron, which would be Luke, Wedge, Tycho, and Wes. Now, this only went 3 issues, like I said, and it's kind of like a prequel to the Rogue Squadron comic book that was coming out at the time, because Luke Skywalker is still in control of Rogue Squadron. Now, in it, they had this minor adventure. There is a Gorax in it. A Gorax is the creature that was in the Ewok movie, the Ewok Adventure movie. And I always loved it when they made connections to that movie. I loved Ewoks, obviously, and I love that Ewok movie. So anything that, you know, took things from the Ewok movie was, it got a rise out of me. I was like, oh yay, look at that, the Gorax! But it was just like a little cameo. Now this takes place a few weeks after Return of the Jedi. Luke is still in control of Rogue Squadron, meaning he's the captain, he's the leader. And at the end of the comic book, he's going to give that leadership over to Wedge. He's going to, you know, step down as Rogue Leader, promote Wedge, and then move on. And I think I understand what went on back at Dark Horse at the time. They said, hey, we need to do a Luke story passing the torch to Wedge, you know, to own Rogue Squadron. And the story they come up with was kind of lackluster. I mean, it's just a little adventure. There's nothing really to note about it. And of course, when it came out, I was excited because I thought Michael Stackpole had written another, you know, X-Wing story. But Michael Stackpole didn't do it. Maybe he didn't want to, or maybe didn't have the time. Now, they had a good choice in Hayden Blackman. I like a lot of Hayden Blackman's stories, so I was fine with him being the writer of it. But at the same time, like I said, good idea, the passing of the torch from Luke to Wedge. But it just kind of happens at the end. I don't know, what am I mean, I have zero imagination, so could I do better? No, probably not. But I'm just saying that I just didn't understand what the point was. But the X-Wing comic book was probably selling really well, and Dark Horse is like, ooh, how can we cash in on this? Well, let's make a prequel series to it. Also, this is kind of odd, and maybe it's just me, but Luke Skywalker, I mean, yeah, he's the leader of Rogue Squadron, right? The original leader, and then he handed it to Wedge. But it felt wrong having Luke in there. It's like, no, Wedge doesn't take orders from Luke. Wedge owns Rogue Squadron. And it's kind of weird. It's like, oh man, I wish Luke wasn't in this. It's kind of what you're thinking after a while, which is just why can't this be the crew? You know, Wedge, Wes, and Tycho. Why can't they just be out there? Why they don't need Luke? What's Luke doing as a leader? And it's crazy to think about that. But at this point, the X-Wing books had come out, the comic book was going on, and so we were used to seeing Wedge in control of Rogue Squadron. And, you know, this shows you how he got control in a way. It's not really that big of a story. But at the same time, you're reading it thinking, this feels off. Luke shouldn't be flying with them. I kind of equivalent it to the Highlander TV show. If you've never watched it, Christopher Lambert was the Highlander in the movies that came out way before, I mean, 10 years, I think. It may have been a little less than that, but it was way before the TV show even came about. Connor McLeod was the Highlander. And in the first episode of the Highlander TV show, Connor McLeod makes a guest star appearance, you know, to kind of kick off the series with Duncan McLeod, his descendant or long lost relative or whatever. And I bet people watching it like, oh man, Connor, there's the Highlander, this joke, this wannabe TV wannabe. But nowadays, when I think who's the Highlander, I honestly think Duncan McLeod. I do not think Connor McLeod, even though, you know, in the canon, I guess, Connor McLeod was the original Highlander. He should be the original Highlander. So Luke should be the leader of Rogue Squadron, but now it just seems wrong seeing him in that spot. And Wedge should be always in that spot. It's almost like Wedge always found it, even though that's incorrect, and I know that. But maybe that's why this comic book just didn't do it for me. It just wasn't as exciting, and it wasn't the story that I wanted it to be. Now, I'm sure they did their best with whatever, you know, Hayden Blackman had to do, but to be honest, and it wasn't just that because Stackpole wasn't writing it, it's just because it just felt off. It comes from a timeline in the Rogue Squadron era that we really don't care about, so to speak. Now, maybe that's just me, but that's how I felt about it. Anyway, folks, that's all the time I have for now. See you next time with another video.